Beneath the glistening waves, humans enter the realm of misunderstood predators. Shark attacks, though rare, spark primal fears, often from tragic misunderstandings. Embracing these ancient marvels reveals the delicate balance of life, urging us to shed irrational fears. Their survival reminds us of our humble place in nature's grand design. Here are 6 attack stories. What should have been the serene shores of Kaanapali Beach in Maui, Hawaii, had turned into a horror theater in 2005. The people who witnessed the terrifying incident would bear its memories all their lives. Kaanapali Beach had immaculate white sand and crystal-clear waters, filling the criteria of every tourist searching for paradise. But they did not know that ancient predators, reigning supreme through the ages, still lurked below the surface of these waters. For months, tourist Bertha Hildegard Schnitzelbank, 48, of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, had been looking forward to this Hawaiian vacation. Weighing 300 pounds, Bertha knew she was plus size, but she wanted to enjoy the beach like anyone else. The trip was a surprise from her husband, Gunther Schnitzelbank, the supervisor in a sausage factory, to celebrate their anniversary, having been married for 25 years. As Bertha waded into the warm, inviting waters, she felt a sense of freedom she hadn't known in years. The buoyancy of the ocean lightened her almost gracefully. Unbeknownst to her, this moment of bliss was about to be shattered by one of nature's most efficient killing machines. Lurking in the deeper water, a 14-foot tiger shark dubbed Old Snaggletooth by local fishermen was watching for an opportunity. Over the years, this terror of the marine system had the teeth visibly jagged from so many battles and feasts. On this particular day, it sensed an opportunity for a meal more significant than ever. As Bertha was floating contentedly some 50 yards from the shore, Old Snaggletooth made its move. Fast and brutal, the first strike sent Bertha's scream, cutting the air, scattering seabirds, and sending the beach throngs aghast. Gunther had dozed off on the beach when he jolted awake to the view of his worst nightmare being played out before his eyes. Lifeguard Kailani Kamaka became the first responder to the emergency. The 28-year-old native of Maui grabbed his rescue board and paddled furiously toward Bertha, who was now thrashing in an increasingly large pool of blood. The shark, momentarily stunned by the size of its prey, circled back to finish the kill with its broad, blunt snout leading the way. Panicked, the tourists scrambled to get out of the water, while others stood frozen with horror, unable to look away from the shocking scene. Then it was Gunther's turn. Driven by misguided heroism, he grabbed a beach umbrella and leaped into the water, intending to swim toward his wife, but was held back by other beachgoers. Kai reached Bertha just as Old Snaggletooth went in for its second bite. The lifeguard pulled Bertha partly up onto his board. The shark wasn't about to give up its meal quite so easily. A tug-of-war ensued between man and beast, with Bertha's life in the balance. However, assistance arrived just in time from an unlikely source, marine biologist Leilani Kakoa, who happened to be visiting the beach that day. Recognizing the futility of fighting the shark, she focused instead on dragging Bertha to safety up the coast. One of the rescuers used his rescue board to hold the shark at bay, while Leilani swam Bertha back to the beach. However, Old Snaggletooth wasn't done. In one final terrible lunge, the shark bit through Bertha's leg, nearly severing it at the knee. By the time they made it ashore, Bertha had lost much blood. Frantic beachgoers had already called emergency services, and they arrived promptly. Paramedics worked feverishly to stabilize Bertha before a crowd of shocked onlookers. The beach was closed, Bertha was whisked off to Maui Memorial Medical Center, and a shark hunt was organized. However, Old Snaggletooth had already disappeared into the depths, leaving behind a shocked community and a panicked tourism industry. Kaanapali was engulfed by a media frenzy for the next few days. News vans clogged the parking lots, and reporters accosted anyone willing to give a soundbite. Against all odds, Bertha survived. She lost a leg below the knee and suffered severe injuries, but her spirit remained unbroken. The ordeal was a harsh reminder of nature's power and the thin line between human recreation and wildlife preservation. Kaanapali Beach would return to its former beauty with a newfound respect for the ocean and its creatures. Somewhere in the vast expanse of the Pacific, Old Snaggletooth kept swimming, a silent testament to the mysteries of the deep that would always remain beyond human grasp. With a rugged coastline and vibrant marine ecosystem, the Pacific Northwest has been home to whale enthusiasts and nature lovers for hundreds of years. This summer, 2013, Tofino, a small coastal town at the westernmost tip of Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada, was overwhelmed with tourists who wanted to see these mighty orcas up close. Since its beginnings as a First Nations camp immemorial, Tofino has become a tourist haven for surfers, hikers, and wilderness watchers. It boasts a rich tradition by the sea, from early fur trading to modern-day ecotourism. The Frostwick family, Father Thaddeus, Mother Cordelia, and their two children, 14-year-old Orion and 10-year-old Juniper, clambered aboard the moderately sized tour boat Salty Whiskers one fresh morning, eager for what promised to be a memorable whale-watching adventure. Captain Finnegan Galeforce, an aged mariner with a quick wit and a penchant for terrible ocean puns, greeted them with a cheerful grin and a weather-beaten cap stuck precariously onto his salt and pepper hair. As Salty Whiskers chugged out of the harbor, Thaddeus Frostwick couldn't shake off that unease. He had always been a worrier, and now, knowing he would be on a small boat in the vast ocean, he did more churning to his stomach than the gently rolling waves far below them. Always the optimist, Cordelia almost bounced excitedly as she clutched her ever-ready camera. Orion, so very teenager-ish, pretended not to care but kept his eyes on the horizon. Juniper, clutching her soft orca toy, Splashy, peppered Captain Galeforce with questions about whale behavior. Their first hour of the tour passed uneventfully. Captain Galeforce regaled them with sea tales, each punctuated with a groan-worthy pun that made Orion roll his eyes so hard they threatened actually to fall out his head. Just as Thaddeus was beginning to relax, thinking they might get back to shore without incident, a cry from Juniper shattered the calm. She screamed to Finnegan to look, pointing to the boat's port side direction. Suddenly, some distance away, a pod of orcas popped up and out of the water, showing their jewel-colored black and white patterned bodies as they reflected off the bright sun. Captain Galeforce throttled the boat, letting it drift as the fantastic beasts approached. The Frostwicks watched, their eyes wide, as the orcas breached and dived, their powerful bodies impressively arcing through the air gracefully before disappearing below the waves. Cordelia's camera clicked furiously, taking advantage of every moment. Even Orion abandoned his cool pretensions and was craning over the rail. For a fleeting moment, Thaddeus forgot all his trepidations, eyes agog. Captain Galeforce, for once in his life, was wordless, beaming at the joyous expressions from the family. But fascination quickly turned to alarm when one oversized male orca started circling Salty Whiskers. Its 6-foot-tall dorsal fin cut through the water, disturbingly determined. Captain Galeforce frowned at the whale's behavior, way too aggressive for his tastes. The giant orca veered suddenly, and its course now seemed set directly for the little boat. The impact, when it arrived, threw everyone off balance. There was a frightened yelp from Juniper, and she clutched Splashy even more closely. All had color drained from their faces, and Thaddeus grabbed at the cabin wall. At this, Captain Galeforce rose to the occasion, and his high spirits masked a visage of determination. He summoned everyone into the cabin and said the engine should be switched on. But much to his surprise, the propeller was a bit dented in the shock, and for all intents and purposes, there they were stuck. The orca circled back again, ramming the boat. The hull creaked ominously as a small leak began to form near the stern. Proving himself considerably more level-headed than anyone had placed bets on, Orion took up a bucket and started bailing. Cordelia clutched Juniper to her side, trying to calm the terrified daughter and battling her panic. Adrenaline pushed Thaddeus beyond his fear as he helped Captain Galeforce broadcast the distress call. The captain's weathered hands fumbled over the radio controls, but his voice remained calm as he requested help from all nearby sea vessels. Between sending out calls, he shared his theory that the male killer whale might be trying to establish territory and protect a nearby calf. The next shockwave nearly capsized the Salty Whiskers, sending water over the sides and drenching two horrified passengers. Juniper's sobs merged with the creaking of stressed timber and the ominous sound of the orca's exhalations as it surfaced directly behind them. Thaddeus sincerely wished he had insisted on a nice, safe, land-based vacation instead. Just as things seemed like they couldn't get any worse, With the boat filling higher and higher with water and listing dangerously to one side, salvation appeared on the horizon. The Orca Guardian, an even larger whale-watching boat under the no-nonsense captaincy of Harriet Thunderbolt, had received their distress signal and was coming fast. Captain Thunderbolt, a giant of a woman with biceps that would put most loggers to shame, maneuvered her boat between the salty whiskers and the angry killer whale. She expertly combined the engine rumble with a unique underwater sound system, creating a pitch to deter the whales from harassing them. It wasn't without its tense moments, though. Their effort was spent slinging lines back and forth between the two boats to transfer the passengers. But the male orca tried one last attempt to get at the salty whiskers. Captain Thunderbolt's quick thinking and expert boat handling kept the whale at bay long enough for the Frostwicks and Captain Galeforce to scramble aboard the Orca Guardian. As they puttered homeward to Tofino, leaving the slowly submerging hulk of the salty whiskers in their wake, the full impact of the past hours began to sink in. Holding tight to her stuffed whale, Splashy Juniper transformed from terrified to utterly fascinated by orca behavior, bombarding Captain Thunderbolt with questions. Orion, meanwhile, recounted his bailing efforts in detail to anyone who would listen, his calm facade finally giving way to the emotion of the experience. Through some miracle of divinity, Cordelia had kept her camera unspoiled. She had some great pictures of the orca, one perfectly timed to it breaching next to the boat, which would win her a national wildlife photography contest. For his part, Thaddeus was shaken yet immensely relieved, about to find himself gaining a newfound respect for the power of nature and the captains who navigate these waters. Despite losing his beloved salty whiskers, Captain Galeforce never lost his spirit. On the way back, he entertained everyone with increasingly terrible puns, much to the stoic chagrin of Captain Thunderbolt. Within weeks, the Frostwick's adventure became a powerful reminder of how unpredictable wildlife encounters can be, and how much the ocean and its creatures deserve respect. Their harrowing experience underscored the idea that sometimes the best family trips are the ones that don't go as planned. In Tofino, the tale of their ordeal quickly spread, each retelling punctuated by one of Captain Galeforce's infamous puns. Yet those who truly love and honor the briny blue possess an indomitable spirit that triumphs over adversity. This story became a testament to the resilience and respect the sea demands, forever bonding the Frostwick family and the Tofino community with a shared sense of awe and reverence for the ocean's majesty. In the summer of 2016, thousands of sunseekers streamed into the Florida Keys, a chain of tropical islands 120 miles long, setting off the southern tip of Florida. Among them were Mike Johnson and Sarah Thompson, a young Minnesota couple here to celebrate their second anniversary. Little did they know that their eloping would become a terror-stricken survival moment against one of the ocean's most feared predators. Connected by crystal-clear waters and vibrant marine life, the history of the Florida Keys stretches back as far as the 16th century, when Spanish seafarers first explored them. The Keys were notorious for their unpredictable weather and dangerous marine life, such as various species of sharks. Mike is an adventurous 28-year-old IT specialist who was always attracted to the oceanic explorations in the Keys. Sarah, a 26-year-old teacher at the local elementary school, was with him. Although a little apprehensive about this point, she gave in to Mike's strong will and the promise of seeing colorful fish in the tropics. On one particular day, the couple reserved a snorkeling tour through Ocean Explorer Tours, with the veteran guide, Bob Captain Wilson, at the head of the vessel. Captain Wilson, though one might have pictured a menacing, hard-nosed boat captain with a nickname like that, was a pleasant 45-year-old with sun-weathered skin and a beard that seemed to have its ecosystem. As the tour boat, aptly named Seabreeze, launched from Key Largo, Captain Wilson addressed the group of 8 tourists, detailing safety procedures and marine life they might encounter. He casually mentioned that bull sharks were in the area, but reassured everyone that the statistics on attack rates were meager. Mike's eyes lit up when he mentioned sharks, and Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. The sailboat dropped anchor beside a colorful coral reef, and the tourists slipped eagerly into the warm turquoise waters. Mike and Sarah described the underwater views as they swam out into the sea, holding each other's hands. Neon-colored fish darted about them, and even Sarah's worst fears couldn't resist the beauty of it all. After some half hours of diving, Mike saw something big and dark far off. Excited at the thought of seeing a shark, he pulled on Sarah's arm and pointed at it. She thought that he was in danger, and thus she started panicking and thrashed in the water. Little did the couple know that their activities had attracted a 9-foot bull shark, known for their aggression and ability to move between saltwater and freshwater. Bull sharks are one of the most dangerous species to humans. This encounter drastically reduced the newlyweds' chances of survival. Well, the shark started to circle the couple out of curiosity. Mike knew it was a severe time, and he tried to keep as calm as possible, slowly leading Sarah back toward the boat. But Sarah, in panic, was acting like an injured fish, quickly triggering her shark prey drive. Then came the heart-stopping moment, a charge by the bull shark. Its powerful jaws clamped on Mike's left calf and a muffled scream was sent through his snorkel. The water around them began to turn red. Terrified, Sarah looked on as Mike instinctively punched the sensitive nose of the shark. Momentarily dazed, the shark let go. Seizing the element of surprise, Mike grappled with agony over the pain and clung on to Sarah, who he then began swimming with to the boat, blood being left in their wake. True to his moniker, Captain Wilson had already spotted the action and leaped into action. Equipped with an ingeniously designed bionic shark deterrent, he jumped into the water to create an electromagnetic field that would jolt the shark's sensory organs. After that, the bull shark became confused and slipped away into the deep. It was all he could do with the help of other tourists to get Mike and Sarah aboard the Sea Breeze again. Speeding back into shore, the captain administered first aid to the wound on Mike's hand, thanks to his many readings on marine emergencies. Still in shock, Sarah watched in horror as her boyfriend's color paled by the minute. Once ashore, the paramedics took him to Mariners Hospital in Tavernier. The next few hours were a blur of surgeries, blood transfusions, and anxious waiting. Mike had lost a significant amount of blood, and there were concerns about potential nerve damage in his leg. This fulfills a dream come true for a local marine biologist and conservationist. It was their chance to lecture people about shark behavior and the balance in aquatic ecosystems, stressing that such attacks were rare and usually a consequence of human activities destroying their natural habitats. Exactly 1 week later, Mike was finally released from the hospital with very stringent instructions for his rehabilitation. What had started as a celebratory anniversary trip for the couple turned into an extended stay in the Keys, not precisely how they had seen it in their minds. Her guilty feelings over panicking and causing the attack only led Sarah to throw herself headlong into helping Mike recover. Slowly but surely, Mike recovered in the following months. They took their experience as an opportunity to bring awareness of ocean safety and shark conservation, opening a YouTube channel called Shark Survivors to discuss their event and interview marine experts. A year later, Mike was surprised, bemused, when he suddenly felt drawn to return to the Florida Keys. This time, though, he wanted to take a glass-bottom boat tour rather than depend on snorkeling. As they enjoyed the views of life underwater from the boat's safety, Mike and Sarah were caught in mementos of how that frightening experience had affected them. The bull shark's attack caused physical harm and bonded them into a tighter unity. It had taught them respect for the ocean, the creatures that lived in it, and the strength to keep cool in a dangerous situation. As they now looked at a distant shark fin slicing through the water, Mike squeezed Sarah's hand. They both silently appreciated horror in a powerful and beautiful force of nature. Within the vast and rugged section of northern Australia that encompasses Kakadu National Park, 2010 witnessed a compelling story along the murky waters of the South Alligator River. Notwithstanding its mischievous name, it was not alligators that inhabited the river, but some of the world's most enormous saltwater crocodiles. This park was known for its wide range of ecosystems and ancient Aboriginal rock art sites. It was against this magnificent background of natural beauty and hidden dangers that four friends set out on what was supposed to be an adventurous river expedition. Peter Evans, a 32-year-old wilderness guide with sun-tanned skin and a penchant for bad puns, led the group. Mara Anderson, a 28-year-old red-headed marine biologist, seemed to have ingested an encyclopedia on aquatic life. Next was Michael Chen, a 35-year-old former Olympic swimmer turned adventure YouTuber. Finally, Angela Davis, 30, rounded out the group, an accountant eager to escape her number-crunching life in Sydney. Their journey started on a sweltering Tuesday morning towards the end of October. 2 sturdier kayaks were hired to ferry them along with their loads for the 3-day trip. Peter, the responsible guide, briefed them on every detail of safety measures, particularly vigilance in the case of crocodiles. As they paddled downstream, long shadows cast by the dense mangrove forests on either bank spread across the water. The air was heavy with humidity and the cries of exotic birds. Keen for content, Michael captured their progress on a waterproof camera mounted to his kayak. They had paddled miles by the middle of the afternoon. Angela was far from her strength and skill level, so she needed to catch up. Peter called a short rest and steered them toward a little bank of white sand. As they drew their kayaks up onto the beach, none spotted the 2 scaly ridges that broke the surface within a few hundred yards away, moving with a deceptively speedy silence. It happened in an instant. As Angela stepped out of her kayak, barely ankle-deep in the murky shallows, a vast form erupted from the depths. A saltwater crocodile, easily 6 meters long, its enormous jaws in a deadly grip upon Angela's left leg. Her scream of terror and pain shattered the relative quiet of the river. Instinct kicked in. With all his years of wilderness experience, Peter grabbed the closest substantial object, a sturdy paddle, and charged into the water. Mara recalled a counterattack from her scientific background, something crocodiles often do to release their prey. Armed with her paddle, she joined Peter. Michael, with athletic reflexes running at full tilt, bounded to assist. He pulled his rescue rope from his kayak and threw one end to Angela, who wrapped it around her arm despite the excruciating pain. The next few minutes were chaotic. Peter and Mara paddled furiously at the crocodile's snout, while Michael pulled hard on the rope to free Angela from the giant reptile. Surprised by such fierce resistance, the crocodile instantly loosed its grip. That was all the advantage the group needed. With an almost Herculean effort, Michael yanked Angela free. The crocodile thrashed in the shallows, then slipped back into deeper water. Peter and Mara backed hastily away from the river, their eyes on the surface for any reappearance of that deadly, scaly form. Angela lay on the bank, pale and shaking, her leg an awful, mangled mess of torn flesh and exposed bone. Mara shoved aside her shock and fell back on some first aid training. She fashioned a tourniquet out of a spare t-shirt, which stemmed the worst bleeding. Peter's face grim, he pulled out their satellite phone. What had been an idyllic expedition had now become a race against time. He rang for emergency evacuation, realizing that each minute counted in their battle to save Angela's life, if not her leg. While waiting for help, Michael used his camera to take shots of Angela's injuries to inform the arriving medical team. To keep Angela conscious, Mara asked questions about her life in Sydney to distract her from the pain. Peter stood guard, his paddle poised, searching the river for any sign that the crocodile would return. An hour later, a whir of helicopter blades cut through the close humidity. A medical evacuation team arrived in time to take stock before bundling Angela into the chopper. As it whisked her off to the nearest hospital in Darwin, 3 friends were left standing on the riverbank, shell-shocked by a turn of events no one could have possibly harnessed. The consequence gave new meaning to their adventure. They turned from their original course and paddled at full speed for the nearest ranger station. On the way, they marked the location of the attack to report it to the park authorities to help avoid further attacks in the future. Months later, the group gathered again over cups of coffee at a Sydney cafe. Angela spoke about her progress, her leg saved by brilliant surgeons but never to be the same. Michael's footage proved a terrible and salient reminder of the dangers still lurking beneath Australia's surface. For Mara, work on behalf of crocodile conservation and responsible tourist management had taken over. Due to the near misses, Peter had also developed new safety procedures for his wilderness tours. It was an odyssey by the riverside that ended far different from what they had imagined, but in an iron bond between them. They clinked coffee cups to the fallen, but survived. Willing companions as they realized their encounter with Australia's apex predator had changed them forever, in a way that made one respect the wild and unpredictable nature of the outback. A few miles off Bimini Island, the transparent waters of the Bahamas proclaimed a fascinating underwater experience. It was the year 2010, and the blaring sun was relentless against the azure skin of the Caribbean Sea. Bimini, long sought for its ample marine biodiversity and encounters with hammerhead sharks, has pulled divers and marine enthusiasts around the globe for quite some time. He had come halfway around the world for it, after all. Zeke Thornberry, the 38-year-old professional underwater photographer from Australia, had a state-of-the-art underwater camera rig. Years of experience recording in treacherous waters, trying to catch fantastic footage of the elusive hammerhead sharks that frequented these parts. The dive boat named Sharkbait gently bobbed on the ocean waves. Captain Lena Rodriguez, a veteran Bahamian sailor with skin like sun-kissed leather and attitude to spare, gave Zeke a short nod and a look right before he took the plunge. With a hint of care, she called over her mate's shoulder, saying those hammers weren't the garden-variety reef sharks. They could turn from curious to cranky faster than they could say crikey. Zeke nodded, flashing a thumbs up as he adjusted his mask. He fell back into the water with no grace and splashed beneath the waves, a trail of bubbles lifting in the air behind him. The underwater world welcomed him with a kaleidoscope of colors, vibrant coral reefs teeming with tropical fish-like living confetti. The first shadow began to appear as he descended to about 30 meters, then another and another. Soon he was surrounded by a school of hammerhead sharks, the T-heads moving sphinx-like as they banked around him. His heart pounded excitedly and his fingers made the familiar reach upward, without his conscious brain telling them to hit the record button. The great hammerheads reappeared, all three, 4 meters of them, and they appeared to take quite a liking to this oddly bubble-blowing deviant. Zeke panned the camera slowly, taking in their poet-like poise and pointed gaze. He was doing his best, documenting majestic creatures in their habitat. But as the minutes ticked by, the mood of the water began to shift. The sharks swam in more erratic circles now, their paths closing in around Zeke. He could see that their pectoral fins were rotated downward. That was a sure sign of agitation, something he had learned from the endless briefings on safety. Zeke's excitement turned to concern in a flash. Zeke remembered his training and attempted to make his body as large as possible by stretching his arms and legs while keeping the movement slow. He was aware that jerky movements might provoke sharks' attack impulse. The hammerheads didn't seem to care. Their actions became increasingly emboldened. One colossal female, which Zeke mentally dubbed Big Berth, made a close pass, her rough skin nearly grazing his wetsuit. Zeke's pulse quickened. He very clearly realized his predicament's degree. He lay more than a kilometer from the dive boat, and all that lay between him and safety were the agitated hammerheads. Zeke started climbing carefully, always watching the circling predators. He wielded his camera rig like a shield between him and the most aggressive sharks. The heavy equipment, which had seemed more of a burden than anything else during long dives, appeared like a lifeline now. All the while, Zeke's mind was running wild with the things that could have happened. He had already heard reports from divers who used their air regulators to make bubble curtains around them, so that sharks would not approach them. He had always assumed them to be baseless rumors. There was nothing to lose at that point, though. He pointed the regulator at the most aggressive shark and blew out. The shark veered away as if startled by the draft of air. Emboldened by this small victory, Zeke pressed on with the ascent, using his bubbles strategically to keep the hammerheads at bay. After a seeming eternity, but only about 15 minutes, Zeke surfaced, waving his arms frantically and yelling something about the dive boat. Scanning the waters nervously, Captain Lena maneuvered Sharkbait toward him. As Zeke was hauled aboard, gasping and trembling, Captain Lena's face showed relief and exasperation. She flung a dripping towel at him, clearly frustrated by the ordeal. Zeke gave a weak chuckle as he lay back to catch his breath. It was terrible, but he could not help but bleed a feeling of pride over it all. He had faced one of the ocean's most magnificent predators and lived to tell about it, and more importantly, to share the footage with the world. But in the ensuing weeks, as Zeke went over the recordings and made them tangible, he began to understand in a new way that the line between fascination and peril in one's profession was fine. That day's recording won numerous awards and was used in a famous nature-oriented documentary series. This experience, however, also helped to make Zeke a strong advocate for more responsible underwater filming practices. He began collaborating with marine biologists to draw up guidelines for filming large predators that would not place the diver or the predators at needless risk. Zeke Thornberry's encounter with the hammerhead shark was an experience wherein the ocean teaches that one moment of beauty and danger is met with an equivalent weight of responsibility in documenting such matters. As for Captain Lena, she loaded up some extra air tanks, just in case more overzealous Aussies wanted to take the plunge into sharky waters. The azure waters of the Red Sea, heated by the scorching sun, mirrored the color of the dive boat gently rocking in the waves. It was 2011, and the ship was anchored a couple of miles off the coast of Hurghada, Egypt. Thick with hope and expectation, a group of divers prepared for an experience they would later describe as the most intense, life-changing adventure of their lives. Among the divers were 32-year-old accountant Dennis Lawson from London, who had finally succumbed to lifelong peer pressure, and his dive buddy Hannah Reeves, a 28-year-old marine biologist from Sydney. Hurghada was a tiny fishing town that grew into a prominent tourist destination decades ago. Its beautiful beaches and colorful coral reefs were called Egypt's Riviera. Various marine species surround this place, more than 1,200 fish and 250 species of coral. But sometimes the dangers behind beauty are even passed by experienced divers. As Dennis and Hannah pulled on their wetsuits and checked their gear, they received a briefing on the day's dive site, the beautiful Ghota Abu Ramada Reef. Its splendid coral structures and teeming marine life made it easy to see why it was chosen. Kareem, the dive master, reminded them to be mindful of the marine environment and emphasized not touching or harassing any animal life they encountered. Dennis and Hannah entered the water with a splash, heading down to their designated outcrop. The reef exploded into 1,000 colors in every direction, with schools of tropical fish darting back and forth among the canyons of coral outcroppings. Dennis could hardly wait to start photographing while Hannah shifted into scientist mode, already engrossed in the fine details of the ecosystem. Dennis and Hannah were examining the reef when Dennis experienced his live dramatic scene, a beautiful clownfish in an anemone's residence. Desperate for his picture-perfect photograph, Dennis advanced and made his way to a large crevice in the coral. Hannah saw him nearing the crevice and gestured with her hands to show that he must not get too close. But Dennis was far too engrossed clicking away, most likely in his mind. Suddenly, an enormous body's yawning jaws surged from the reef's crevice. A giant moray eel, easily 6 feet long, darted right at Dennis at lightning speed. Its powerful jaws clamped down on his left forearm, the razor-sharp teeth sinking through his wetsuit and into his flesh. His eyes squinted with shock and pain, bubbles escaping from his regulator as he let out a muffled scream. Upon being attacked, Hannah sprang into action. She knew that moray eels are typically non-aggressive and only act defensively within their territory. Aware that the moray's jaws could hold on securely if they closed onto something, she understood the risks involved. Hannah moved closer, knowing from experience that pulling in the opposite direction would cause more harm, potentially tearing through flesh. She calmly placed her hand on the eel's head, trying to soothe it while signaling Dennis, now panicking, to remain perfectly still. Although Dennis slightly relaxed, the eel still did not release its grip. Hannah recalled her marine biology training on handling a moray eel bite. Slowly and cautiously, she reached for her dive knife, careful not to harm the eel or break the handle. She gently worked the knife handle into the corner of the moray's mouth with a steady hand, gradually forcing it open. The eel finally released its hold after what seemed an eternity, but what had, in reality, only been a matter of minutes. It was back in its aperture, and Dennis was free but badly mauled. Clouds of blood filled the water between them, and Hannah realized it was time to take action. With the water around them rapidly turning red with blood, Hannah was struggling to keep Dennis calm, breathing normally. At the same time, he resisted the urge to race to the surface with the onset of panic-driven rapid ascent and decompression sickness. Hannah quickly assessed the injury on Dennis's arm, deep puncture wounds with quite a chance for infection from the teeth of the eel. She removed pressure bandages from her emergency first aid kit and worked on him quickly but safely in the void. Within seconds, the bleeding of Dennis was stopped. She signaled to him that they needed to ascend. Numerous suspensions punctuated the rise, and Hannah carefully watched Dennis to ensure he was not about to break from her and ascend frantically to the surface. They completed their safety stop at 5 meters, to the apparent frustration of Dennis, who was eager to get moving toward the boat. Hannah knew well that decompression would be appropriately performed if one was to suffer as few negative consequences as possible. Hardly had they gasped their way to the surface when Hannah was already screaming for help. The boat crew, anxious about their long lateness, had already begun to raise a resuscitation equipment package. They hauled Dennis aboard. After that, Kareem took over, gave further first aid, and called for the ambulance. That experience would remind Dennis of the sporadic nature of encounters in the ocean. Even Dennis couldn't shake those feelings. His heart raced, not just in fear, but from amazement at the force of the attack. As relieved as she was with the outcome, Hannah could not shake the feeling that the fine line between human interaction and marine conservation sat precariously poised. In the following days, as Dennis recovered in a Hurghada hospital, news of the moray circulated among the local dive community. It raised discussion about responsible diving and respecting marine habitats. Hannah used the incident as a case study about the need for better, diverse education and awareness. The experience profoundly changed Dennis. It didn't diminish his love for the ocean, but instilled a tremendous respect for marine life and the importance of maintaining a safe distance while diving. This incident inspired him to focus his photography on raising awareness of marine conservation, transforming a potential tragedy into a powerful force for good. As with all dramatic sea incidents, the giant moray eel quickly became a local legend. Stories of its formidable presence and the encounter with Dennis and Hannah spread among the diving community. Novice divers would hear cautionary tales of the eel's territorial behavior, ensuring the lessons learned and the changes it inspired were preserved. These stories highlighted the respect and caution needed when interacting with marine life. They underscored the importance of conservation and awareness, turning a harrowing experience into a lasting legacy that educated and protected future divers.